Akojua Mensah stood in her small shop in the busy market area of Accra. Her hands were busy checking the quality of fabric that had just arrived that morning. The sun was hot outside and sweat dripped down her back, but she did not mind. She had been working since 5 o'clock in the morning, as she did every single day for the past 15 years. Akojua was now 52 years old. Her husband, Kwame, had died when she was very young, leaving her with nothing but a small daughter and big dreams. She had no money, no business experience, and no one to help her. But she had something more valuable than all of those things. She had determination and a strong spirit that refused to break. Year after year she worked hard. She learned the textile business from older women who took pity on her. She bought small amounts of fabric and sold them in the market. She saved every cedi she could. She did not buy nice clothes or go to parties. She did not spend money on things she did not need. Everything she earned went back into her business. Now, at 52, Akojua had built something beautiful. Her textile shop was known throughout Accra. People came from different parts of the city to buy her fabrics. She had hired more than 30 women to work with her, and many of them were widows like herself. She paid them fairly and treated them with respect. Her business had grown so much that she had saved enough money to send her daughter, Zainab, to good schools. Zainab had become a smart, beautiful young woman who worked as a manager at a big hotel. Akojua was proud of what she had done. Not because she wanted people to praise her, but because she had kept her promise to her late husband. She had raised their daughter well. She had given Zainab a good life and a good education. That was enough for her. But now, something wonderful and also troubling was happening. Zainab had found love. She had fallen in love with a man named Kwesi Okafor. Kwesi was a businessman from Lagos, Nigeria. He was tall, handsome, and he dressed in expensive clothes. He drove a big car and had money in his pocket. When Kwesi first came to Accra and met Zainab, he seemed like the perfect man. He was polite to Akojua. He brought gifts. He talked about his big business deals and his plans for the future. Zainab had fallen in love quickly. Within 6 months, Kwesi asked her to marry him. He got down on one knee and gave her a ring. Zainab cried happy tears and said yes. She came running to her mother's house to tell her the good news. Akojua hugged her daughter and felt happy for her, even though something small inside her had felt a little uncertain about Kwesi. But she said nothing to her daughter. She only held her and smiled. The wedding was planned for 3 months later. It would be a beach wedding in Accra, something beautiful and special. Akojua had already started saving extra money for the celebration. She wanted to give her daughter a beautiful day that she would remember forever. She began planning everything carefully. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Zainab came to the shop. Akojua was sitting at her desk, doing her account books and counting the money from the day's sales. She looked up and saw her daughter coming toward her, but something was different. Zainab's face looked sad and worried. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying. She was not wearing her hotel uniform, which meant she had left work early. Akojua stood up immediately. She knew her daughter well. She knew every expression on Zainab's face. Something bad had happened. "Mama," Zainab said softly, and her voice shook as she spoke. "We need to talk. Can we go upstairs?" They went up to the small room above the shop where Akojua kept her personal things and where she sometimes rested during the day. Akojua closed the door and locked it. She made her daughter sit down on the chair and brought her a glass of water. She did not ask questions. She simply waited because she knew that sometimes people need time to find the words for bad news. Zainab drank the water slowly. Then she began to speak, and with every word, Akojua felt her heart breaking a little more. "Kwesi came to my office today," Zainab said. "He told me he needed to talk to me about something important. He was very serious, Mama. Not like his usual happy self. He said that the wedding cannot happen the way we planned it." Akojua's stomach dropped. She waited for her daughter to continue. "He said that the venue he chose, the hotel on the beach, costs a lot of money. He said the decorations will cost more money. The food, the music, everything is very expensive. He said we need 50,000 cedis to make the wedding proper." 50,000, Mama. That is so much money. Akojua sat down slowly. 50,000 cedis. That was almost everything she had saved for Zainab's future. "But that is not all," Zainab continued, and now her voice became very small and sad. "He said that if we cannot give him this money, then he cannot marry me. He said if we are poor, we are not good enough for him. He said my family must prove that we are worthy of him. He said this is the bride price in his culture. But Mama, I know this is not right. This is not what bride price means." Akojua said nothing for a long time. She looked at her daughter's face, at the pain and confusion there. She thought about all the years she had worked. She thought about all the sacrifices she had made. She thought about all the dreams she had for her daughter's future. Zainab began to cry. Mama, I do not know what to do. I love him. I want to marry him. But I do not want to hurt you. I do not want to take all your money. That money was for us, for our future together. What should I do, Mama? Akosua reached over and took her daughter's hand. She looked into Zainab's eyes with a gaze that was deep and full of something Zainab could not quite understand. Then, slowly, Akosua smiled. Not a sad smile. Not an angry smile. But a smile that seemed to hold a secret. A smile that seemed to know something that Zainab did not know. Do not worry, my child, Akosua said in a calm and quiet voice. We will see what happens at your beach wedding. A man who makes demands through fear is not a man worth marrying. But let us wait and see who Kwesi truly is. Zainab looked at her mother with confusion written all over her face. Mama, what do you mean? What will you do? Will you give him the money? But Akosua only squeezed her daughter's hand and smiled that mysterious smile again. Trust me, Zainab. Trust your mother as you always have. Everything will be fine. That night, Akosua sat alone in her room and made several phone calls. Her voice was calm and quiet, but it was also strong and determined. She was planning something. She was moving a chess piece on a board that only she could see. Kwesi Okafor sat in an expensive restaurant in Lagos. The restaurant was one of the fanciest places in the whole city. The walls were painted gold and soft music played in the background. Waiters in white uniforms moved quietly between the tables, serving expensive wine and fancy food. Kwesi sat at a large table with 5 of his close friends. They were all businessmen like him, or at least they pretended to be. Kwesi was celebrating. He held a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand and he was smiling a very big smile. He kept telling his friends about what had happened in Accra. He told them about Akosua and her textile shop. He told them about how he had demanded 50,000 cedis from the widow. He told them how she had no choice but to agree to his demand. My brothers, you should have seen her face, Kwesi said, laughing loudly. He took a long drink of his whiskey. The widow was shaking. She was so nervous. She knows that without me, her daughter will have nothing. She knows that I am her daughter's only chance at a good life. So what can she do? She must give me the money. It is simple. His friends laughed and clapped him on the back. They thought he was very clever. They did not know the truth about Kwesi. They did not know that he had done this many times before. They did not know that his business was not as successful as he pretended. They did not know that most of his money came from dishonest ways. Kwesi continued to boast. This widow thinks she is so strong because she built a small textile business. But what is that compared to me? I am a businessman. I am powerful. She is nothing. Her money is nothing. Her daughter is mine now. Soon I will have 50,000 cedis and then I will disappear. I will go somewhere else and find another rich widow's daughter to marry. This is how the game is played, my brothers. The friends laughed again, but none of them were real friends. They were only interested in Kwesi's money and his stories. They did not care about him or about the people he hurt. But far away in Accra, something very different was happening. Akosua sat in her small room above her textile shop. The room was very simple. There was a bed, a small table and 2 chairs. The walls were painted light blue. There was a window that looked out onto the street below. It was evening now and the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in colors of orange and purple and red. Akosua held her telephone in her hand. She had an old phone, not a fancy one like Kwesi's. But it worked well and that was all that mattered to her. She had already made 3 phone calls. Now she was making a 4th call. The first person she had called was her cousin, Judge Mensah. He was an older man, now retired from the court system. He had spent 40 years working in the justice system, and he knew many important people. He also knew how to investigate things and how to find information. When Akosua called him and told him her story, he listened carefully. He did not interrupt her. When she finished speaking, he said only one thing, I will help you, cousin. This man sounds like trouble. The second person she called was a woman named Esi Owusu. Esi was a documentary filmmaker and an investigative journalist. She was known throughout West Africa for uncovering lies and exposing corrupt people. She was brave and smart and very determined. When Akosua told her about Kwesi, Esi became very interested. She said to Akosua, this man sounds like he has hurt many people. Give me 1 week. I will find out who he really is. The third person was Nadia Boateng, who worked as the head of a women's rights organization in Accra. Nadia spent her days helping women who had been hurt by men. She had heard many stories of women being treated unfairly and being exploited. When Akojua told her about Kwesi's demand, Nadia became very angry. She said, "Akojua, you are not alone in this. There are many women like you and your daughter. Let me help you find out the truth about this man." Now, on this evening, Akojua was calling Judge Mensa again. He had news for her. "Akojua," Judge Mensa said over the phone, "I have been making inquiries. I asked some old friends of mine in Lagos. What I found is very interesting. There is a man named Kwesi Okafor. He has done business with many people, but many of those people say he is not honest. They say he takes money from people and then disappears. They say he lies about his business and his money." Akojua listened carefully, saying nothing. "But there is more," Judge Mensa continued. "I found something even more important. There is a woman in Lagos. Her name is Amma. She was engaged to marry Kwesi 5 years ago. Her family gave him money for the wedding. Then Kwesi disappeared. He married someone else instead. Amma's family lost all their money, and Amma lost her respect in her community because the wedding did not happen. There is also another woman in Kumasi. The same thing happened to her. And another woman in Takoradi. 3 women, Akojua. All the same story." Akojua closed her eyes. She felt sad for these women, but she also felt strong. She knew now that she was doing the right thing. "Thank you, cousin," she said. "This is very helpful." 2 days later, Isai came to visit Akojua at her shop. Isai was a tall woman with bright eyes and a serious face. She carried a folder with papers inside it. She looked around the shop, looking at all the beautiful fabrics. Then she looked at Akojua and said, "I found many things about your daughter's fiancé. Not all of them are good." Isai opened her folder and showed Akojua many photographs. The photographs showed Kwesi with different women. In some photographs he was kissing a woman who was not Zainab. In other photographs he was holding hands with a woman in a hotel lobby. Isai showed her the dates on the photographs. They were all from the last few months, while Kwesi was supposed to be in love with Zainab. "He has been cheating on your daughter," Isai said. "This woman's name is Tina. She is a woman from Lagos. Kwesi has been seeing her since before he even met your daughter. I have spoken to her. She does not know that Kwesi was engaged. She thinks they are in a serious relationship." Akojua looked at the photographs. She felt pain in her heart for her daughter, but she also felt something else. She felt like she was seeing clearly now. She was seeing who Kwesi really was. Isai continued, "I also found information about his business. He imports goods from Asia. But he does not have proper permits. He pays workers very little money. He has been involved with some government officials to move money illegally. If the authorities looked carefully at his business, he would be in serious trouble." Over the next few days more information came to Akojua. Nadia from the Women's Rights Organization called her with more news. She had found documents showing that Kwesi had extracted money from at least 5 families over the past 10 years. In each case he had made the same demand. In each case the wedding never happened. Akojua gathered all this information carefully. She kept it in a folder in her room. She did not tell Zainab anything yet. She simply waited and planned. One evening, Akojua sat alone in her room and looked at all the evidence. She thought about what she would do. She thought about her daughter's future. She thought about all the other women that Kwesi had hurt. And she made a decision. She would not give Kwesi any money. Instead she would reveal who he really was. She would do it in front of everyone at the beach where the wedding was supposed to happen. She would do it on the day when all of Accra would be watching. Akojua smiled to herself. It was the same mysterious smile she had shown to her daughter. It was a smile that knew a secret. A smile that knew what was coming. She was ready for the beach wedding now. She was ready for everything. The morning of the wedding arrived with bright sunshine and clear blue sky. The beach in Accra was beautiful. The sand was golden and soft. The ocean waves were gentle and blue. Seagulls flew above the water, calling out to each other. Everything seemed perfect for a happy celebration. Guests began arriving early in the morning. They came in cars and taxis. They walked along the beach carrying gifts wrapped in colorful paper. There were relatives from both Akojua's family and Kwesi's family. There were friends from Zainab's work at the hotel. There were neighbors and business associates. There were people from Kwesi's company in Lagos. In total, more than 200 people gathered on the beach. The pavilion where the ceremony would take place was a large tent made of white cloth. It was decorated with beautiful flowers. White chairs were arranged in rows. There was a long table at the front where the bride and groom would stand. Everything looked like something from a beautiful dream. Kwesi arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning. He wore a white traditional outfit with gold embroidery. He looked like a king. His family sat in the front rows, occupying the most important seats. His mother wore a long wrapper and a big headscarf. His father looked serious and proud. His brothers and cousins sat nearby, also dressed in fine clothes. Kwesi stood at the front of the pavilion with a smile on his face. He was very confident. He was thinking about the 50,000 cedis that Akosua would give him soon. He was thinking about how he would take the money and disappear. He was thinking that Zainab's mother was foolish and weak, just like all the other women he had tricked before. But he did not know what was about to happen. At 10:45 the musicians began to play. They played beautiful traditional drums and modern instruments. The guests stood up. Zainab was coming. Everyone wanted to see the beautiful bride. Zainab walked slowly down the aisle. She wore a long white wedding dress with beautiful beads sewn into it. Her hair was arranged beautifully. She looked like an angel. Tears of happiness came to the eyes of many people who watched her. Kwesi smiled even bigger when he saw her. She was so beautiful and soon she would be his wife. Or at least that is what he thought. But before Zainab could reach the front, before she could stand beside Kwesi at the altar, something unexpected happened. Akosua stood up from where she was sitting. She stood up very slowly and very deliberately. Everyone in the pavilion watched her. She was dressed in the most beautiful traditional Kent cloth. The cloth was red and gold, with patterns that told stories of strength and courage. She wore gold jewelry around her neck and on her wrists. Gold rings were on her fingers. She looked like a queen. Akosua walked to the front of the pavilion. The musicians stopped playing. The guests became silent. Everyone wondered what was happening. This was not part of the wedding plan. Akosua looked at the wedding organizer and said quietly, "Please pause the ceremony for a moment. I need to speak to everyone here about something very important." The wedding organizer looked confused. He looked at Kwesi to see what he should do. Kwesi's face had changed. His confident smile was gone. He looked angry and worried. He stood up and said, "What is this? Why are you stopping the ceremony? Sit down, woman. We do not have time for your nonsense." But Akosua did not sit down. She remained standing and she smiled. It was that same mysterious smile. It was a smile that was calm and strong and full of knowledge. "I ask everyone here to listen to me," Akosua said in a clear voice. "Before my daughter marries this man, there are things you should know. Things about who he really is." Kwesi's face became red with anger. He started to shout, "This is a trick. This is nonsense. I will not allow this. Guards, remove this woman from the pavilion." But the guests did not move. They were too interested in what Akosua was saying. They wanted to hear what she had to say. Akosua gestured to someone standing at the back of the pavilion. It was ESI, the journalist and filmmaker. ESI came forward carrying a laptop computer. Behind her came Judge Mensa and Nadia Boateng. "My name is ESI Owusu," the journalist said. "I am an investigative journalist. I have researched Kwesi Okafor for the past 2 weeks. What I found is very concerning." ESI opened her laptop and showed a large screen to everyone. On the screen appeared photographs and documents. She showed the photographs of Kwesi with different women. She showed the dates on the photographs. She told the story of each woman. She explained how Kwesi had done the same thing to them. How he had demanded money from their families. How he had promised to marry them and then disappeared. "In Lagos there is a woman named Ama," ESI said. "Kwesi took 50,000 cedis from her family. Then he married someone else. In Kumasi there is a woman named Corker," ESI continued. "Same story. 50,000 cedis demanded. The wedding never happened. In Takoradi there is a woman named Efua," ESI said. "Again the same demand. Again the same betrayal." The guests gasped. Many people covered their mouths in shock. Kwesi's mother put her face in her hands. His father stood up and stared at his son with an expression of deep disappointment and anger. But ESI was not finished. She showed more documents. She showed business records that proved Kwesi's company was involved in illegal activities. She showed bank records that proved he was not as rich as he claimed. She showed letters from workers saying he had not paid them for their labor. "Kwesi Okafor is not an honest businessman," ESI said clearly. "He is a criminal who uses women and their families for money." Then Judge Mensa stepped forward. He held up papers from his investigations. He explained that Kwesi had been involved with corrupt government officials. He explained that if the authorities looked at Kwesi's business carefully, there would be criminal charges. Finally, Akosua stepped forward again. She looked at Zainab, who was standing there in her beautiful white dress. tears now flowing down her face. Then she looked at Kwesi. "You came to my daughter and you asked for money," Akosua said in a calm but strong voice. "You thought I was weak because I am a widow. You thought I had no power. You thought I could not protect my child. But you were wrong, Kwesi. You were very wrong." Akosua smiled that mysterious smile one more time. "I did not smile because I was weak. I smiled because I knew the truth. I smiled because I knew that a man like you always reveals his true nature to those who watch carefully. I smiled because I knew that truth is more powerful than lies. And I smiled because I knew my daughter deserved to know who you really are before it was too late." Kwesi stood there frozen. His face was white. His confident expression was completely gone. His family sat in shame. His brothers and cousins looked at him with disgust. His mother wept. The guests began to whisper and talk among themselves. Some people stood up and walked out of the pavilion shaking their heads. They could not believe what they had just heard. They had come to celebrate a wedding, but instead they had witnessed the exposure of a man's lies and crimes. Kwesi tried to run, but security guards who had been told what was happening blocked the exits. He was trapped in the pavilion with all these people who now knew the truth about him. Zainab stood in her white wedding dress, tears running down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. She understood now what her mother had been doing. She understood now that her mother had been protecting her all along. Akosua walked over to her daughter and held her in her arms. She whispered to her, "It is okay, my child. You are safe now. Your mother will always protect you." The beach wedding had become something very different from what anyone had expected. It had become the day when truth defeated lies. It had become the day when a mother's love and courage saved her daughter from a terrible mistake. The pavilion became completely silent. Everyone held their breath. All 200 guests stared at the screen where ESI was showing the photographs and documents. The only sounds were the waves of the ocean in the distance and the seagulls calling above the beach. ESI moved closer to the screen. She clicked to show the first photograph. It was a picture of Kwesi with a young woman. They were sitting in a restaurant together and Kwesi had his arm around the woman. The woman was smiling at the camera. Below the photograph there was a date written in white letters. It said the photograph was taken just 2 weeks before Kwesi had proposed to Zainab. "This is Tina," ESI said, pointing to the woman in the photograph. "Tina lives in Lagos. She works as a nurse at a private hospital. When I spoke to Tina, she told me that Kwesi has been her boyfriend for 2 years. She did not know that he was engaged to Zainab. She thought they were in a serious relationship. She thought he loved her." ESI clicked to the next photograph. This one showed Kwesi and Tina kissing in a car. Then another photograph showed them holding hands in a hotel lobby. Then another showed them together at a restaurant, looking very happy together. "These photographs were all taken in the last 3 months, ESI explained. While he was supposed to be in love with Zainab and planning to marry her, he was with Tina in Lagos. He was lying to both women at the same time." Zainab made a small sound like a hurt animal. Her hand went to her heart. Akosua pulled her daughter closer and held her tight. Kwesi's face had turned very pale. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. He just stood there looking at the photographs of his betrayal displayed for everyone to see. His mother had covered her face with her hands. Her body was shaking. She could not bear to look at her son. His father stood up from his chair. His face was red with anger, but it was not the anger of defending his son. It was the anger of a father who felt shame because of what his son had done. It was the anger of a man who was disappointed in his own child. ESI continued with her presentation. She clicked to show more documents. These were business records. They showed that Kwesi's import company had not paid taxes for 3 years. They showed that he owed money to many suppliers. They showed that he had borrowed money from banks and never paid it back. "Kwesi claims to be a successful businessman," ESI said. "But the truth is very different. He owes more than 300,000 cedis to various people and companies. He is not rich. He only pretends to be rich. He drives expensive cars but he does not own them. They are leased in other people's names. He wears expensive clothes but he does not pay for them. He has credit cards that are almost at their limits." Judge Mensah stepped forward now. He was holding a thick folder of papers. He opened the folder and held up several documents. "I have been making inquiries in the legal system," Judge Mensah said in his serious voice. "I found that there is an investigation into Kwesi's business activities. The investigation involves possible fraud and money laundering. Government officials are looking at how he moves money between different countries without proper documentation." The guests gasped. Money laundering was a serious crime. People began to whisper urgently to each other. Some people took out their phones and started making calls. News travels fast in Accra, and this was very big news. Nadia Boateng now stepped forward. She was holding papers from her women's rights organization. She looked very angry. "I have found records of 5 women," Nadia said, her voice firm and strong. 5 women in 5 different cities across West Africa. All of them have the same story. All of them were engaged to Kwesi. All of them or their families gave him money for a wedding that never happened. The amounts were always between 40 and 60,000 cedis. The pattern is always the same. Nadia began to read the names and stories of each woman. As she spoke, the reality of what Kwesi had done became very clear. He was not just a man who was cheating on one woman. He was a criminal who had deliberately hurt many families. He had taken their money and their trust. The first woman was named Amma from Lagos. Her family had given Kwesi 55,000 cedis. Kwesi disappeared and married another woman instead. Amma became very sick from the shame and embarrassment. She had to leave her job. The second woman was named Corker from Kumasi. Her family gave Kwesi 48,000 cedis. When Kwesi disappeared, Corker's father had a heart attack from the stress and grief. He died 3 months later. The third woman was named Efua from Takoradi. She gave Kwesi her own savings of 32,000 cedis. She thought he loved her and wanted to marry her. When he left her, she tried to hurt herself. She spent 3 months in a hospital. The fourth woman was named Ajoa from Sikandi. She was engaged to Kwesi for 8 months. She borrowed money from her family to give to him. When he left her, she could not face her family. She moved to another country to start a new life, alone and ashamed. The fifth woman was named Abina from Cape Coast. She was the most recent before Zainab. She had been engaged to Kwesi just 1 year before. Her family gave him 50,000 cedis. They were poor and they borrowed money from relatives to give to him. When Kwesi disappeared, the family became divided by debt. Relatives stopped speaking to each other because they were angry about the money lost. As Nadia read these stories, the beach became completely silent. The silence was so heavy that people could almost feel it pressing down on them. This was not just about money. This was about broken hearts. This was about broken families. This was about the pain that one man had caused to many people. ESI now showed more photographs on the screen. These were photographs of Kwesi meeting with government officials. In one photograph, he was giving money in an envelope to a man in a suit. In another photograph, he was meeting with someone in a private office. In another, he was at a hotel with someone who looked like a person involved in illegal business activities. These photographs show that Kwesi is connected to people involved in organized crime, ESI explained. He is not just a dishonest businessman. He may be involved in much bigger illegal activities. All of this information was overwhelming. It was like watching a building that looked strong and solid suddenly collapse, revealing that inside it was rotten and weak. Kwesi's father stood up. He looked at his son with an expression of such disappointment and anger that it seemed like his heart was breaking. He did not say anything. He just looked at Kwesi for a long moment, then he turned his back and walked away. He walked out of the pavilion and did not look back. His wife followed him, still with her face covered, still weeping. Kwesi's brothers and cousins also began to leave. They left one by one, until Kwesi was sitting alone in the front row with no family members beside him. Akojua then stood up and walked to the front of the pavilion. She stood beside ESI and looked at Kwesi. She smiled that mysterious smile one more time. "I smiled because I knew," Akojua said slowly and clearly so that everyone could hear. "I smiled because I have lived 52 years on this earth. I have learned that character cannot be hidden forever. Truth is like the sun. You can try to cover it with clouds, but eventually it will shine through." She paused and looked at her daughter, then back at Kwesi. "A man who is dishonest about small things will be dishonest about big things," Akojua continued. "A man who can lie to one woman can lie to many women. A man who will take money through fear will do worse things to get more money. I smiled because I knew that if we waited and watched carefully, we would see who you really are, Kwesi. And now everyone here can see it too." Akojua walked back to where Zainab was standing. She took her daughter's hand. The white wedding dress that Zainab wore now seemed to represent something different. It represented innocence protected. It represented a daughter saved by a mother's love and wisdom. The guests began to stand and applaud. They applauded Akojua for her courage. They applauded ESI for her investigation. They applauded Judge Mensa and Nadia for bringing truth into the light. They were not applauding because the wedding was happening. They were applauding because lies had been exposed and a young woman had been saved from a terrible mistake. Kwesi sat alone, completely defeated. His lies had all been revealed. His crimes had all been exposed. His mask had been completely removed, and everyone could now see exactly who he was underneath. The security guards moved toward Kwesi. They did not touch him roughly, but they made it clear that he needed to leave the pavilion. Kwesi stood up slowly. His face was completely empty of any expression. He looked like a man whose entire world had just fallen apart, which was exactly what had happened. His mother followed behind him, still weeping. His father did not look at him. His brothers walked far away from him, as if his shame was something that could spread to them like a disease. The entire Okafor family left the beach in silence. They did not speak to anyone. They did not look at anyone. They simply disappeared into the cars that had brought them, and the cars drove away. As they left, some of the guests began to whisper and shake their heads. Some people felt pity for Kwesi's family, who had been brought shame because of what one man had done. Others felt only anger for all the women who had been hurt. The wedding ceremony was cancelled. The musicians stopped playing. The beautiful pavilion with all its decorations seemed sad and empty now. Guests began to leave slowly. They talked among themselves about what they had witnessed. They talked about Ekojua's courage. They talked about how a mother had saved her daughter. They talked about how truth had defeated lies. But before everyone left, something important happened. Zainab began to cry. Not tears of relief anymore, but real tears. She cried for the time she had wasted on Kwesi. She cried for the love she thought was real but was only a lie. She cried for the girl she had been just hours ago, a girl who had believed in a man who did not deserve her belief. Ekojua held her daughter and let her cry. She did not try to stop the tears. She knew that tears were necessary. They were healing. She held Zainab as the sun began to move across the sky and the afternoon became evening. As the weeks passed after that terrible day, Zainab slowly began to heal. She went back to her work at the hotel, and her managers and colleagues were very supportive. They had all heard about what had happened, and they admired her courage for facing the truth. Many people came to her and told her that she had done the right thing. They told her that better things were waiting for her. Ekojua's business, meanwhile, became even stronger. The story of what had happened on the beach spread throughout Accra. Then it spread to other cities in Ghana. Then it spread across West Africa. Newspapers wrote about it. Radio stations talked about it. People on social media shared the story. But what was most important was that the story inspired other women. Women who had been hurt by dishonest men came forward. Women who had hidden their shame began to speak. Because of Ekojua's courage, more women found the strength to speak their own truth. Businesses from all across West Africa began to contact Ekojua. They wanted to buy her fabrics. They wanted to support her because they respected her as a woman of integrity and courage. Her textile business grew so much that she had to hire more workers. She opened a second shop. She opened a third shop. What had been a small business became a large business. But Ekojua did not become arrogant or proud because of this success. She remembered where she had come from. She remembered being a poor widow with nothing. She used much of her new wealth to help other women. She paid her workers well. She gave bonuses to those who worked hard. She helped women who were in difficult situations because of dishonest men. One day, about 6 months after the beach incident, a young man came into Ekojua's shop. His name was Kofi. He was an architect who designed buildings. He came to the shop looking for special fabrics to use in a project he was working on. While he was choosing fabrics, he met Zainab, who was working in the shop that day helping her mother with customers. Kofi and Zainab began to talk. They talked about the fabrics. Then they talked about other things. Kofi was kind and gentle. He listened carefully to what Zainab said. He asked her questions about her life. He seemed genuinely interested in her as a person, not just as a beautiful woman. Over the next several months, Kofi came to the shop many times. Each time he would talk to Zainab. They began to have lunch together. They began to spend time together outside of the shop. Slowly, without either of them planning it, they fell in love. But this love was different from what Zainab had felt for Kwesi. This love was quiet and steady. It was built on honesty and respect. Kofi never demanded anything from Zainab. He never asked for money. He was interested in her thoughts and her feelings. He listened to her stories about her mother and her life. He told her stories about his work and his dreams. A year after the beach wedding that never happened, Kofi asked Zainab to marry him. But he did not ask for money. He did not make demands. He simply took her hand and said, "Zainab, I love you. I respect you. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Zainab said yes. She said yes with a smile that was full of real happiness, not the confused and troubled feeling she had had before. The wedding was planned for the same beach where the truth had been revealed. But this time, everything was different. It was a simple ceremony. There were no expensive decorations. There was no big pavilion with hundreds of guests. Instead, there were just the people who truly loved Zainab and Kofi. Akojua was there, of course. Isai the journalist was there. Judge Mensa was there. Nadia Boateng was there. These were the people who had helped save Zainab. They were like family to her now. The ceremony was beautiful because it was honest and true. Zainab wore a simple white dress. Kofi wore a simple suit. They stood on the beach and said their vows to each other. They promised to love each other, to be honest with each other, and to face life's difficulties together. When they finished their vows, they walked along the beach together, holding hands. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple and pink. The waves were gentle and calm. Everything felt peaceful and right. As Akojua watched her daughter walk along the beach with her new husband, she felt something very deep in her heart. It was not just happiness. It was a sense of completion. It was the feeling that she had done what she needed to do as a mother. She had protected her child. She had taught her child to recognize truth from lies. She had shown her child that character was more important than money or status or appearance. Later that evening at the small celebration by the beach, Zainab and Kofi danced together. The music was traditional African music played by local musicians. The dance was slow and beautiful. As they danced, Akojua watched with a smile on her face. But shortly after the beach wedding, Akojua and Zainab made an important decision together. They decided to start a foundation called Women's Truth Foundation. The purpose of the foundation was to help women who had been hurt by dishonest men. The foundation provided counseling and legal advice. It helped women report crimes. It helped women rebuild their lives after being betrayed. Nadia Boateng joined them as the director of the foundation. Esai Owusu created documentaries about women's stories to raise awareness. Judge Mensa provided legal guidance. Together they created something beautiful and powerful. The Women's Truth Foundation grew quickly. It opened offices in 5 different cities across West Africa. It helped hundreds of women. It exposed criminals. It changed lives. Akojua became known not just as a successful businesswoman, but as a defender of women's rights. International organizations recognized her work. She won awards for her courage and her dedication to protecting women from exploitation. But what made Akojua most proud was not the awards or the recognition. What made her most proud was knowing that she had saved her daughter. What made her most proud was knowing that she had helped other women find their strength. What made her most proud was knowing that she had turned her own pain and her own struggle into something that helped others. One evening, as Akojua sat in her office looking at the list of women who had been helped by her foundation, she thought about that day on the beach when everything changed. She thought about the smile she had shown to her daughter, the mysterious smile that held a secret. She understood now that her smile had not been mysterious at all. It had been the smile of a mother who knew that truth was more powerful than any lie. Akojua looked at a photograph on her desk. It was a photograph of her and Zainab and Kofi, taken at the beach wedding. They were all smiling, real smiles that came from real happiness. She put her hand over her heart and whispered a prayer of thanks to her late husband, Kwame. She thanked him for giving her the strength to raise a good daughter. She thanked him for teaching her, even in his absence, that integrity and courage were the most valuable things a person could possess. Then she looked out her window at the city of Accra stretching out before her. She thought about all the women out there who were struggling, who were being hurt, who needed help. She thought about all the work that still needed to be done. And Akojua smiled. It was not a mysterious smile anymore. It was a smile of purpose. It was a smile of a woman who had found her calling. It was a smile that said, "I will keep fighting. I will keep helping. I will keep believing that truth and love are stronger than lies and greed." Because that was what Akojua had learned from her life. That was what she had learned from her struggle as a widow. That was what she had learned from protecting her daughter. That was what she had learned from facing a man like Kwesi and defeating him with nothing but truth. Character was the only true measure of a person's worth. Not money. Not status. Not appearance. Just character. And Akojua had spent her entire life building a character that was strong and true and good. And now she was spending the rest of her life helping other women build the same kind of character. That was the real victory. That was the real happy ending. Not a wedding with a dishonest man, but a life filled with purpose and meaning and the knowledge that you had made a difference in the world.